Edward Finds a Phantom, written by Richard Jordan and retold by Wingstriker 3801. Edward the Blue Engine has worked on the island of Sodor for many years and has forgotten more than most other engines will ever know. Edward has an ambience of wisdom to share, but the other engines are not always eager to hear it. One night, Gordon was fuming. He was due to take an overnight goods train to a faraway station near the end of the line. He was arguing with Edward over the best way to get there.
"My way is the fastest,"
Gordon bellowed. "Well, my way is the safest," Edward scowled. "If you aren't careful, you might have an accident."
"I've travelled up and down the main line hundreds of times, little Edward. I know the best way. Stick to your branch line and let me handle myself, thank you."
Edward didn't say another word. He knew that Gordon could be stubborn and only hoped he would see sense. Soon, Gordon was on his way up the line. He was still cross with Edward for contradicting him.
"Know-it-all,"
he said.
"He thinks just because he has a few years on me that he knows everything. Well, I'll go my way and show him that's the fastest and safest. Then he'll be sorry."
Gordon charged ahead into the night, not knowing what lay ahead. But as he rounded the bend, it happened.
"Oh, glory! What is that?"
Gordon bellowed. Frightened, he screeched on his brakes, but it was too late. Edward was resting when his driver woke him up.
"There's been trouble down the line, Edward. Gordon never made it to the station."
"Oh, I knew it. I warned him," Edward said. "I bet he went his way and had an accident."
"Come on, old boy. Let's see if we can find him."
Edward was preparing to leave when he heard the trucks in the siding wailing like ghosts. "What are you up to?" Edward asked. "Gordon has been taken away by the Phantom." "Oh, don't be so daft," chortled Edward. "There are no phantoms here." "Oh, but there are," affirmed the truck. "Engines ought to never go down that old part of the line. That's where the engine snatcher lives." Edward rolled his eyes. "Well, they say that if an engine gets too close, he'll be pulled off the rails and dragged to a fiery pit below." "Oh, yes, said another truck with his eyes wide. "You can see the engine through the light of the red signal. Here, and while you wait, it reaches out and grabs you." "Oh, ridiculous," Edward said indignantly, and huffed away. "Beware the Phantom, Edward," the trucks called. By the time Edward got to the old part of the main line, the moon had risen high overhead. The line was not well lit, and it was hard to see. In the distance, Edward saw a red tail lamp. It was Gordon's trucks, scattered along the line. But where was Gordon? Edward ran alongside and looked in the spot where Gordon should have been. It didn't make sense. High above them stood a red signal, hovering menacingly overhead, like a sentinel on guard. Edward was reminded of what the truck said, and suddenly found himself thinking of nothing but the Phantom. Then suddenly a wailing sound came from deep down an embankment. Edward, his driver, and his fireman all jumped, petrified with fear. Edward didn't say a word or move an inch. The wailing came again, but Edward realized that it sounded familiar. "That's no Phantom," said Edward sharply. "That's Gordon." Edward's driver shone a light down the embankment, and sure enough, there was Gordon. "How on earth did you get down there?" Edward laughed, but his driver pointed Edward towards the answer. In an overgrowth was a set of points that had sunken down into the embankment. The points were old and rusted, and couldn't be switched back. The signalman had set the signal to red so that engines wouldn't accidentally run off.
but Gordon eventually had ignored it. The next morning Sir Topham Hatt spoke severely to Gordon. "Signals must be minded," he scolded. "I shudder what to think of what might happen if you had been pulling coaches instead of trucks." Gordon looked down. "Furthermore, what Edward doesn't know about railways isn't worth knowing. He might be old, but I hope you recall that he ran the main line long before you came here, and knows it better than any other engine, including you, Gordon." Gordon was in disgrace. Soon the old section of the main line was restored. The trucks still talk about the Phantom, and claimed that it not only wails in the night and snatches engines, but is also big, blue, and named Gordon.